email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Today I'm having a conversation with my fellow Forbes Books author, Jeanet Wade. Jeanet's an expert EOS supplementer, business coach, speaker, and author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, The Human Team. Jeanet, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you.
So I was wondering if we could start maybe with some background. Were you just born a people person, or was this something you developed?
No, I'm actually probably naturally, clinically an introvert, which means people drain my energy, which is probably why I was on a quest to figure out how to harness human energy, because I was trying to figure out how to make it not so exhausting for me.
So I guess the good news is it's something that can't be learned then.
Yeah, it's something that can be learned, or you can be adaptable to, or learn how to navigate through, yes.
You kind of just answered it, but let's go ahead and ask it anyway. So what set you down the path that you're on, that you come out and wrote a book like this?
I think it was always a passion of doing the right thing and figuring out how people can work well together. And it always baffled me, especially once, getting into the work environment and especially corporate America, finding out that all that stuff you read in the books and all those case studies, it's not utopia. And that there are people involved, and there's egos and personalities and drama and all of that. And so what drove me down the path was, there's got to be a way to at least, not solve it completely, but at least navigate through it better.
Right. What I liked in the book was you also have a lot of extra resources, and we'll talk about some of those along the way, but I think people need to hang around to the end because there's a lot of good stuff at the end. So early in the book, you described the problem with the team being completely virtual. What was really the issue?
The real issue and the root issue is truly that we didn't have these needs met that I outline in the book fully on the team, and therefore egos and instincts and reactions ran rampant. And it became, if I had written a parable book about just that team only, probably textbook, the 50 things that could go wrong with humans on a team. That would have been the name of the book. Like everything that could happen happened to that team, to bullying, to drama, to triangulation, you name it. It happened, and it was not pretty.
No, you have a bunch of very eye-opening and soul-searching examples in the book from your own past. And so the bullying was one that I really resonated with me. And then crying in the office about not finding your right place in the company and eventually leaving that company because you never could get clarity around what it was you're supposed to be doing. So I really liked your stories and the way you tied it back to your own past. I thought it was really, really powerful.
Part of the mission was trying to break the mold of business books being, I'm an expert, let me tell you what I know. So sharing the discoveries and the research and all that, yes, but also saying even successful people are vulnerable, real human beings. And you can be put in situations where you think you know how to do it and you think you get it and you think you have the absolute knowledge and ability to do it, and still can be stymied if the team dynamic or the recipe of people brought together can hurt you, right?
Yeah. We work with a lot of teams in my business as well, doing project work, and you can go one or two ways, right? Everybody can really be collaborative and it can go in a positive direction, or you can have that person on the team that just sucks the energy out, right? So I think it's important to try to figure out how to mitigate that. So there are a couple of different terms I want to understand before we really go any further. Let's start by defining Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What is that about?
So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, tried and true psychological principle about the individuals have some fundamental needs that kind of stack on each other. The base being essentially security and safety, food, shelter, right? And we're familiar with that. I always forget the middle rungs off the top of my head. And then the top one is that we self-actualize as an individual. What brought me to that, and what I maybe didn't cover as heavily in the book as I wished I had, was that we haven't figured out how to get self-actualization on team actualization. So getting groups of people to actualize together and move beyond the basic instincts and the basic needs, so bridging that gap from nature to nurture, which I outline in the book, was really trying to flip Maslow into a team format that allowed us to get us out of those reactions and instincts and egos and the fear that people have and the way they react in the workplace, so that we can actually nurture stronger outcomes.
Right, right. So how is that related to the 6 facets of human needs that you have in the book?
Yeah, so 6 facets of human needs is my spin on self-actualization for teams.
Okay.
So it's saying that that framework of 6 human needs or 6 facets of human needs will create stronger team dynamics across the board in which we get people as a multiplier. So I know like Jim Collins talks about, getting the right people, right seat. That's functional. And he also talks about luck as a multiplier. But I think if we can harness people in a new way and really look at getting their needs met before we do things to them, before we nurture them, that we actually can use people as a multiplier.
And you call it your 6 C's?
Yeah, I kind of affectionately, because saying 6 facets of human needs 5,000 times is really hard. So I just eventually said, it's also the 6 C's, right? 6 C's of human need.
And if I wrote those down correctly, there's clarity, connection, contribution, challenge, consideration, and confidence.
Yes.
So one of the things I wrote down as well, I mean, I take a lot of notes when I read these books, and some of it's for the podcast, some of it's just for personal gratification and education. One of the things I wrote down that I really liked was connection to ourselves and others, confidence in our teammates, the ability to positively contribute, clarity about our roles, healthy challenges to elicit our professional best, and consideration from others. I guess that really kind of encompasses the 6 C's.
Yeah, that's kind of the closing statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mic drop. Okay. Another term I saw that you use a lot was team health. What is that? How do you define team health?
So team health is really, if you want to think healthy team dynamics, cohesive functional teams. So looking at it from how do we get healthy behavior and action out of people. So when I say team health, I mean it's a healthy team.
Okay. So it's not about backbiting or climb over you to get to the next rung on the ladder. It's working together.
Right. And so I've had some people misunderstand team health, think I'm talking about physical, medical health. And I'm like, no, I mean like mental, energy, emotional health, like psychological safety things, right? Not just the healthiness of so that we can get better insurance.
And I think we've all seen that, right? We've all been a part of a team where the health was not good. I mean, it may have resulted in physical ailments, but you go into the meeting room and you just don't want to be there. It's like, I got to go and deal with this person again. Or I know that whatever I say, they're going to try to belittle or sabotage, right? And that's not a very comfortable place to be. Is like you use the word psychological safety. There's definitely none of that there.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is that one of the solves for it is that getting the right recipe of people around the room. Too often we have a wrong ingredient, a missing ingredient. It's the recipe is key. And we all have felt that, like that person doesn't quite work here or fit in here, or we're missing someone who could change the dynamic enough that we could get to a different level. We've all felt that, but maybe didn't put it into words. And so we don't fight hard enough as leaders to get the right recipe of people.
Right.
And I think if we do that enough and we get these needs met, that it makes a real change to that accidentally happening to us. It's not an accident. We allow it to happen, right?
I think that's a great point. I never really thought about it that way, but we've all been a part of a team where there was somebody who just didn't quite resonate with the rest of us. And maybe somebody who would have recognized that and replaced that one person, we'd have operated much more efficiently. And because we've also been a part of teams where you actually looked forward to going into the meeting room because you really genuinely enjoyed working with your teammates. So I think that's so important. I think that's really good.
Well, I think you talk about connection in yours as well. And we only connect and collaborate and communicate well, really, truly with those that we belong with. When you don't feel like you belong together, it's a lot harder to communicate. You don't share the same language. You don't share the same perspective. You don't share the same values. It makes it difficult to get that collaboration, communication, and real conversation going.
Yeah, I think I saw that in one of your little excerpts that you have from the PhD person. And there's this thing called othering, which I had never heard that term before, which is pretty cool. So what is othering?
Othering is when you're not fully connected to a team. You don't 100% belong with them, meaning you don't share their guiding principles, their core values. You really shouldn't be on the team. You want to be part of the group, but you're not really on the team. And the team naturally, and you see this in children a lot more acutely, but we still do it into adulthood, that kid doesn't belong here. And so we other them, we separate them, we kick them out, we don't talk to them, or we bully them, right? So we other them. They're other than us is kind of the thought behind that.
And yet at the same time in the book, you talk about we all want to feel part of a tribe, right? We want to be a part of that group, whether we're allowed it or not.
Yeah, the human need for, the longing to belong is always there. So actively seeking the right team as an individual, but as leaders and managers, we need to actively assemble the right team.
Sure, sure. Now, one of the 6 C's is clarity, and you even have a better way of defining it, if I recall. You didn't like Merriam-Webster's dictionary version, but how do you define clarity?
Clarity is no assumptions, absolute context behind things. There is no doubt what someone should be doing. And too many leaders and managers assume that everyone understands them. That if I say marketing, your definition in your head immediately translated to something you assumed, right? And I know in my market, if I say marketing, I'll get one of 2 things. Oh, you're social media, digital SEO. Or I'll get, oh, you're one of those branding people in communications and it's fluffy, pretty stuff, right? And very rarely will I get what my definition of marketing is, which is really understanding your market and the ability to relate to them and create action within it. So that's through product and establishing the right place and promotion and all of it, right? So it's true textbook marketing in my mind. But the problem is I say, hey, could you go out and do that? Could you be my marketing person and go out and do that for me, Clint? And you say yes without clarity. I didn't give you enough context, purpose, why, alignment, information to have absolute clarity. And when you don't have that, you have confusion, you make assumptions, and you go in directions that frustrate me. Right. And that I don't understand why you thought that's what marketing was when I thought it was something else. And every step of the way we do that to our people. And they translate things through their filter, and we don't ensure that conversation has happened, that absolute clarity, right? We talk at them, we dictate to them, we set expectations without agreements, and that does not create clarity. Clarity is a two-way street.
Thank you for saying that, because obviously one of the things I'm passionate about is conversation, which is a synchronous communication dialogue, as opposed to asynchronous, which is one way. And one of the things I think virtual leads to is a lot of asynchronous communication through email and text messages and posting things on Slack or Jira. It's hard to get clarity that way. So the example I like to always use is the game we played as kids called Telephone, where you get 3-4 kids in a row and you whisper a secret one to the other, right?
Yes.
And then of course, by the time the fun of the game is what comes out of that last kid's mouth is not remotely close to what the first person said. And that's because, as you alluded to, the message we receive through our own filter, our own biases, whether we're having a good day or a bad day, the way I define a term as opposed to the way you were defining it. I hear your message. I understand the message in my own way, which may be slightly twisted. And so that happens on down the line. So it's no surprise that the message got mangled when it finally came out the other side. And that's because we were having that asynchronous one-to-one communication as opposed to a dialogue where if the second person could look back at the first person and say, well, how do you define marketing? Because here's my expectation. And when you say turn left, Clint, do you mean turn left at the McDonald's or the first street on the left? Where? And so by asking these clarifying questions, the message gets translated properly to the new person who has a much better chance of passing it on in its unchanged state.
Yeah.
And so I'm a huge fan of clarity. And I do think that clarity is harder to get if you don't have conversations.
Exactly. And so part of what I say is you have to become fascinated with people. You need to get curious, and great conversations from leaders and managers in particular start with, like you said, great questions. So do you mean left here or left there? And are you thinking of this or that? And do you fully understand this way or that way? Right. And that curiosity, not interrogation, but questioning. Because I think that's also a problem. Because when you interrogate people, they shut down, they don't listen. So opening up conversation and having complete agreement, outlining things with context and purpose and why, and in addition to the information, and also concluding it for them so that they don't make their own assumptions. That's kind of the clarity tool at the end of that chapter that talks about, you got to conclude it for them. So what's your next steps? What absolutely we're looking for, by when and how, right? And all of that. Because otherwise you're assuming they're going to just take the action you want. And many times they don't.
So there are different kinds of people in the world. There are some people that naturally question, and as you put it, in a good way, not to interrogate, but to understand. And then there are people that are really big picture people, and they don't understand why you don't just get it and go off. So if I'm one of those curious people and I'm trying to get clarification on what it is you want me to go do, but the person I'm talking with, this needs to give me this information, is one of those big picture, just be clear to you, just go do it. Is there any way to kind of bridge that gap?
When you're talking to a big picture person that you're trying to influence on a team, many times we have to do it as a team. Because honestly, that's part of that team recipe that not all of us are going to hear it the same way, but the whole team needs to be aligned with clarity. So every team member has brought the element and understanding they need to take action. Sometimes the big picture people are in the team and in the room to really challenge us to take the risk and do the innovation, not know the detail. So clarity of their role is to say, what I really need from you is understand the high level purpose and mission, and to be a driver and an innovator behind that. And then the detail people can pick up the questioning.
Right.
Like having clarity of what people really can and can't do is probably part of that clarity.
Right.
Right. Don't try to make everyone the same level of clarity. It's just not going to work.
True. Absolutely. We do need a certain amount of information, but we don't have to get, if you're a big picture person, you would want to run screaming from the room if we start talking details. And as an engineer, I like to, it's a stereotype, but I think some of it's probably true, is when I teach classes, one of the things I find fascinating is if there's 40 people in the room, all the engineers sit together, right? And all the IT people sit together. And the reason the engineers sit together is we all took calculus in college. We all think Dilbert is hilarious. And, we kind of get each other. In your world, we were part of the same tribe, right?
Yeah.
And all the IT people sit together and they don't mind sitting close to the engineers because they're both technically oriented. But boy, both groups want to stay as far away as possible from the marketing team, right? So the marketing people all sit together. And I think it's because we don't speak the same language. As an engineer, I live in 6 decimal places of accuracy. And as a marketing person, and I'm being rude here, and I don't mean to be, but you're kind of big picture. To me, it looks like fluff, right? And so I tell the story that the engineer says, well, marketing person, what do you actually do? You have a lot of meetings, you talk big picture, strategy, blah, blah, blah. But as an engineer, when I go home, you can see the code that I've written, the widget that I've designed. And the truth of the matter is we need both to be successful, because if we're developing things that marketing can't go out and sell, we're not going to make money. If marketing is marketing stuff that we can't actually build, we're not going to make money. So we need to somehow pull people out of the weeds up a little bit, people out of the clouds down a little bit, to a place where we can have a conversation and communicate about whatever the project is. So
yeah, and that's why I like Kolbe as a tool to assess those different MOs and approaches and natural instincts in the room. Because if you have a collaborative team, not a project team that's all trying to get a task done, not a task team, but a collaborative team, you actually need a variety of MOs, because if you get 100% fact finders or engineers in the room, you're going to end up at analysis paralysis at some point. And if you only get us quick starts and marketing people in the room, we're going to spend all your money, brainstorm, and have tons of innovation and really probably not accomplish as much as we think we are. We're going to do a lot, but it's going to be all accelerated and risk taking. If we can get the balance on the team of multiple modalities, we actually get a stronger connection and stronger contribution, which is the other C, right? So contribution into the team that allows us to really fully leverage every person and get the right recipe.
So you mentioned Kolbe in the book as well. What is it, and why do you prefer that one maybe over some of the other ones that are out there?
So there are a lot of assessments in the world. There are ones for cognitive assessment. There's the affective and personality assessments. Kolbe happens to be a conative assessment, which says, what's your natural striving instinct, the way you've been since you were born and the way you will always be? And what I like about it is it just cuts to the chase and the root thing that is you versus the things that could change in any other assessment. I've taken a lot of assessments, and some of them multiple times, and they change every time. And so as I grow and experience, but Kolbe has been who I am and tells me how I react in the world so that I can really harness my energy, simply understand my place on a team, be able to have good team synergy based on that, and really get better productivity because I'm doing what I'm naturally meant to do, right? Because you'll procrastinate things that are uncomfortable. You'll procrastinate things that are natural to your skill. Like you probably enjoy the numbers and the questions and the detail, natural to your skill. If I did that, it's not natural to my skill. I'm a natural simplifier, which means tell me the answer to 3 things and let's move forward. Right? So I like it because it's simple, it's straightforward, it's scientifically valid, it's been proven for decades.
Okay.
And it cuts to the chase of who you really are.
I've never taken that one. I have to check that one out then. I've taken some of the other ones, but I've always felt like I could game the system the way they ask the questions. So I'll be curious to see if it's about who you are at birth. I'd like to try that one.
Yeah, give it a shot. I actually tried to test it to see if I could break it, and I couldn't. And some people have tried it, and it gives you a transition report sometimes, which says you're under stress or strain. So it'll basically say, we couldn't figure this part out on you. You tried to do something, or you were going through some change that made it difficult for you.
Okay. Interesting.
It'll catch you.
Well, maybe I won't try to game it though. All right. So you say in the book that people on teams sorely need clarity or they'll lapse into confusion. And obviously I couldn't agree more. A lot of the times when I'm working on projects, I always like to say that black and white is your friend and gray is the enemy, because anything you leave ambiguous is going to get used against you in the court of project management or in your being successful in getting something done. So I think clarity is really, really important. And we may have touched on it already, but clarity kind of has multiple layers as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really about understanding purpose of vision, how the team is organized and what your role is in it. So clarity of role is key. And clarity of what outcomes the team needs to accomplish, with not just the goal, not just the dollar amount, but the clear tasks and outcomes that allow them to figure out what they should be doing and not be doing. Because otherwise, like you said, I mean, the confusion and the fog, well, just go make stuff happen. We want to get to 10 million. And the team assembles, and sometimes they think they're on a mission and they understand it. They get baffled by it. They're wandering around the fog without clarity. And so we need to create that clear path through the fog for them.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big one. I like the way you put it. It's about clarity of purpose, clarity of individual, and the clarity of process, which I think is, I'm a big 3 fan. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the book, you also share a clarity tool. Can you give an example of how that works?
Yeah, so that's what I was referencing earlier with that. If you can provide context, the content, and conclude it for them as a format. So one of the examples I often will share is, let's just take email as an example, because it's probably most used and tangible example I can give.
Yeah.
And that a lot of times you send out an email and you send a lot of content in it, a lot of information, but you don't necessarily tell them why they're receiving it and what they should do with it with absolute clarity. Like, I send it to 20 people. I don't tell them why I'm sending the content or what the purpose of it is or what I'm trying to achieve, like the context. I give them all the content, but I never tell them, well, I only really need 3 of you to take action. And specifically, I need you to do X, Y, and Z by this date. It's like, I hope the 20 people figure out who's doing what by when, and we make that happen, right? We kind of just send stuff out. I also see this in process. We'll train people on a process. So we'll share the content. This is how we do it here. And this happened with a company that had a lot of drivers for me. One of my teams was saying, we're running into an issue where our drivers, because legally they have to track their time in a certain way, right? So the Department of Transportation law, and it needs to be, only so many hours per day, rest breaks, only so much per week, those kinds of things. And the drivers were not inputting it properly. They had trained them how to put it in the system. They trained them what the policy was, but they didn't tell them why the policy was important. So when they were complaining about, we just discovered, and we're glad we discovered it before auditors did, and we can fix it, that our drivers are not inputting time properly. If they're driving 10 hours one day and 4 hours the next, they're kind of spreading it out. So that shows up in the reporting differently. So I asked them, I said, so did you tell them why it was important, what we were tracking, what the outcomes were if we didn't? They said, no, we trained them on what the system did and what they should do. I go, I bet they consider this a guideline like a speed limit. If the speed limit's 55 in Indianapolis as an example, there's an outer loop around Indianapolis that I've been on quite a bit. Speed limit's 55 there.
Right.
Everybody goes 70, 75. If I go 55, I will literally end up in an accident because people swarm you, right? And you feel this sense of unsafety. So their drivers were like, this is kind of like the speed limit. It's a guideline, but if you have to adjust it, you can in order to make it right. And they said, no, if you adjust it and you don't do it with absolute clarity, the purpose of this is to keep you safe. The purpose of this is to keep us within the law. This is why it's happening. And what we really need you to do with conclusion is do these 3 things. They simplified it and provided clarity. So they went back and added context and conclude to the content. The drivers now are all within code and they're all driving safely. And they all know why. And they all hold each other accountable to it, which is nice. So those are some examples that I see quite often.
I like that. I like that a lot. If I look at it through a project perspective, that I looked at everything with my filter, but it's the clarity of knowing if I'm asking you to report on a project, your status, some people are going to say, don't you trust me? Just I'll get it done. Mm-hmm. But if you can then educate them on why because there are 4 people waiting on you, and we need to know if you're going to be late, not to hammer you, but to know who's going to be affected, and can we adjust something they're doing so that your lateness doesn't hurt us, right?
Yeah.
So by giving them the why of, what the benefit is, then it goes from being an overhead item that I have to tick the box on to something I can now see there's value here.
Yeah.
That concludes part 1 of my conversation with Jeanet Wade, author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, The Human Team. Coming up in part 2, we'll discuss the importance and value of human connection.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about connection at this point, and there's so many things with connection, right? I mean, but without connection, we're othered, we're dysfunctional, we don't belong. I mean, all those things do happen. But one of the things I've been finding, especially, so the book came out in 2021, but it was really written pre and during COVID. But when I first did connection through the research and the discovery, it really was that there's a lot to it, but there's some interesting nuances. And one of them I found is our connection to place is super important. That we connect through geography and ritual quite often as human beings.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.